With the recent news that Concord, Sony's successful speedrun of Let's Blow $400 million, reportedly cost more than any previously released first or second party Sony game, and yet another round of Activision Blizzard layoffs, let's play a game. What do the following decisions by video game companies with hundreds of millions in financial backing have in common? Laying off workers, delaying a game, launching a broken game, cutting features during development, and replacing earnable progression with increasingly expensive microtransactions. Well, they tend to be explained away by the same excuse that can usually be summarized as, we had to make our game worse, and we had to make our work environment less stable because video games are just getting more expensive to make. At this point, it's the gaming industry's dog ate my homework. For the perfect illustration of good business, here's the words of everyone's favorite technology baron and millionaire, Norman Osborn.
Costs are down, revenues are up, and our stock has never been higher.
Well, if it's just business 101 to cut costs and raise profits, what's wrong with modern game companies doing it? Well, if you have a functioning set of eyes, ears, and a prefrontal cortex, you've probably noticed something. A lot of decisions made by these game companies these days, how does Bill Nye put it?
That just makes no sense. I mean, it's just bull.
Today we're debunking the way game companies have been screwing over both players and employees alike, all while hiding behind their shield of development expensive. And it really won't be that hard. Hopefully you'll look at big game companies differently after this video, so let's get into it. Disclaimer, I don't work in the games industry. I've just spent a lot of my life either in business or corporate settings. It's not 5th grade picture day. I'm just a gamer that wears collared shirts. Sue me. But like you, I'm a consumer, and no business exists without our money, so as consumers who can think for ourselves, let's look at some contradictions these companies are making. Or, you know, just keep being a good consumer and don't ask questions.
Just consume product and then get excited for next products.
We'll start with one of the first things a business cuts that also happens to have the biggest impact on people's lives, the workforce. Worker layoffs, studio shutdowns. It feels like every other week there's a new batch of game devs that are out of a job. Sometimes it's sort of expected, like when a game launches poorly, like with Microsoft closing down Arcane Austin after Redfall, or after an expensive acquisition, like with, what do you know, Microsoft again, laying off 1,900 Activision Blizzard employees just after buying the company for just shy of $69 billion. Nice. When a business gets bought, first thing that usually happens is people lose their jobs. It sucks, but it's generally expected.
It's just good business.
But sometimes it's not so easily forecasted. Like Bungie cutting 17% of its workforce right after launching its successful Final Shape DLC for Destiny 2. Critics and players both loved this DLC from what I can tell, and it looks like it sold well. Doesn't matter, time for Bungie to do a second big round of layoffs within a year. If it's true from some anonymous devs that because of incompetent leadership, the layoffs were gonna happen no matter how Final Shape launched, then working at Bungie ought to be considered a form of gambling at this point. What's that? You don't want to be fired? Sorry, I can't hear you over the sound of my $2 million worth of luxury cars I just bought. Look, I'm not in the camp of rich guy bad because rich, but I do think that it could and should be a PR nightmare when people can see a CEO buying these nice cars at the same time they're saying they had to make the hard decision to lay off their people. Anyone remember when the CEO of Nintendo cut his salary in half to keep people working there after the Wii U's failure? If we reduce the number of employees for better short-term financial results, employee morale will decrease, and I sincerely doubt employees who fear that they may be laid off will be able to develop software titles that could impress people around the world. Compare this quote from 2013 to this now, and I think we can see the problem. The man was a prophet. And of course, let's not forget about old unreliable Microsoft closing down Tango Gameworks just after praising its, at the time, recent game Hi-Fi Rush. Seriously, the day after Xbox announced Tango's closure, Xbox studio head Matt Booty had the nerve to say in a town hall that they wanted more games that are smaller and prestigious. You know what game is small and prestigious?
Game award goes to Hi-Fi Rush.
I guess if you're a dev and your Xbox boss starts calling your game small and prestigious, it's time to pack your bags. Looks like Krafton is buying both Tango and the Hi-Fi Rush IP from Xbox several months later, so hopefully the devs there will still have jobs at the end of this thing. Now, if the sales were low, I'm not saying companies should keep paying people they can't afford to. Every business would go bankrupt if they did that. But I am saying if you're gonna fire people and close studios that make small and prestigious games, stop telling your studios to make small and prestigious games.
You don't say!
So what have these mass layoffs shown us consumers about the way that these companies handle their workforce? Let's review. They buy companies at prices they shouldn't, they can't make accurate projections in their own fields of expertise, they'd rather put their money toward the CEO's vanity car collection than a stable workplace, and they absolutely, positively, 100% did not realize or care that the video game boom we saw during the pandemic was only temporary. Wait, you mean people stuck in their houses by government mandate with nothing to do but play video games won't last forever?
You don't say!
I mean, they struck while the iron was hot, so congrats on that, but I doubt that's much consolation to the workers who were hired and then fired just a couple years later for reasons they can't control. Those people looked like they were doomed from the start. Speaking of doomed positions, alright boys, we have $7 million left in the budget on our next game. What should it go to? Server stability at launch? More game modes for variety? A rewarding progression system? No, I've got it. Gaming industry, how about instead of hiring consultancy groups for reportedly $7 million to come preach politics in the break room, maybe you could, I don't know, put that money towards the development of your game? You can usually tell which companies don't value the scam that is consultancy groups when they start getting blasted by modern game journalists. Bad news, boys. After 8 years and hundreds of millions of dollars, Concord was a humiliating flop. Shut it down, maybe we can use it as a tax write-off.
It will stabilize! It's under control!
Good news, we added this.
What the hell is even that?
How about another example? How much better would Remedy's Alan Wake 2 profits be looking right now if they hadn't included Sweet Baby in the budget? Maybe the game would be profitable almost a year after launch if they hadn't paid sensitivity readers to add a race swap here and an inclusive line of dialogue there. Same could be said for Slip and Slide Squad. How different would that game look if the money had gone to content variety and not DEI sensitivity reading? And this is just talking about the cost of hiring those companies. I haven't even mentioned the amount of people that boycott games that do it. Now let's not get it twisted. There's plenty of reasons aside from these kinds of boycotts that caused games like Concord, Slip and Slide Squad, and Alan Wake 2 to perform the way they did. To preach that the only reason they aren't the next Fortnite is because they contain woke ideology is absurd, and anyone telling you that is being willfully negligent.
My ex-wife could.
FBI detected gay. The whole game is ruined. Turn this off. Alright, anyway, moving on. If that's all it took, we'd have no Mass Effect, no Baldur's Gate 3, and even Battlefield and COD would have died several years ago. But let's also not pretend that DEI mandates help a game's performance by any viewable metric.
Is what I'm doing helping?
If you're wondering why companies try to monetize diversity despite the backlash they get, here's the answer. Large investment firms like BlackRock own large stakes in game companies such as Epic, Activision Blizzard, and EA. In exchange for the funds to help develop or sell the game, they give the developer a list of requirements.
It's called a contract.
You want our money? You play by our rules.
And you spend a lot of time talking to companies now about diversity. You now make a point of that's an investment criteria for you.
Well, behaviors are going to have to change, and this is one thing we're asking companies. You have to force behaviors, and at BlackRock, we are forcing behaviors.
While it's true that corporations with a lot of money do have the authority to kind of insert their beliefs wherever they choose, it's more so because they actually believe that this brings them a better return on investment. BlackRock's not the only company like this, but it's a good example for it because it has made public that its data suggests more diverse workplaces statistically show more efficiency. I'm sure BlackRock wanting to appear virtuous to the public has nothing to do about not wanting people to ask more questions about its direct impact on raising the costs of housing and its investment into military weapons contractors. Okay, tinfoil hats back off. Diversity mandates in the workplace and diversity mandates in the product aren't necessarily the same thing, and it looks like it's still going to take several financial failures to teach them this lesson, old man. That's right, they don't care about angry tweets or rant videos. Those aren't going to end prioritizing race or sex over a person's talent at their job. Only bad financial returns will do that. Anywho, the point is it doesn't matter where the mandate comes from, whether it's politics of the devs or investment strategy of the top brass. Inserting DEI may hardly be the only reason for a game's failure, but it will never be the only reason for a game's success. When you take into account people being tired of politics and agendas being thrown into every project, the boycotts I mentioned earlier, and just the cost of hiring these types of consultants, it's only a net negative, or in the best case scenario, a net neutral. Especially when your game is already fighting an uphill battle, like with Concord's unoriginality, Slip and Slide Squad's departure from what people liked about Rocksteady games in the first place, and Alan Wake 2's slow pacing and narrow appeal. If your game's already a tough sell, why throw hot sauce onto a house fire and start alienating potential customers too? There's a difference between just having diverse characters and paying millions of dollars to a company whose job it is to remind you to add diverse characters. How does calling people who disagree with you politically talentless freaks, or saying you don't want white male influencers promoting your game, make your game more successful? Unless you're a juggernaut in the industry, or at the very least have an excellent game with mass appeal, you don't get to be picky about who buys your games. Don't like it, don't buy it turns into, wait, why didn't people buy it?
I said I'm ignoring you. Stop ignoring me, ignoring you!
Do we see the self-defeat here? Point being, maybe workers would get to keep their jobs, games would be more profitable, if companies just weren't blowing their money on DEI consultants.
It's just...
But you know the best part about when they waste money like this? These companies then have the audacity to try and charge back those unnecessary costs to us in the most insulting ways, which we'll come back to in this video. Game development is more expensive now is starting to sound more like we might have blown millions of dollars on having people tell us to add more pride flags.
This one, the Pride outfit. Obviously, this is just kind of a recolor for the Task Force X outfit, and we have all of the other flags just like on all of the other Pride skins.
Can you pay us back for that bad investment? You want to support the devs, don't you? Same goes for instances like with 343 and Halo Infinite. In an attempt to save money, they hired contractors to rotate in and out of the game's development instead of just hiring employees. To absolutely nobody's shock but 343 or Microsoft's, this just turns development of the game into a nightmare. New people had to learn and try to untangle the mess that was their in-house slipspace engine, and by the time they figured it out, it was time to replace them with new people. And now they're apparently ditching the massive investment of the Slipspace engine in favor of just using Unreal in the future. Dude, how much money and work hours did this waste?
I mean, even if I told you, you wouldn't believe it.
But no, Halo Infinite's just abandoning its 10-year plan because the gamers are just too toxic and didn't like the perfect game they put out. But what about the opposite scenario when a company doesn't lay off workers, doesn't hire them either, and tries to squeeze every last penny they can out of the people they have? Sometimes it kind of looks like it ends up in the company's favor. They get to avoid the consequences of crunch culture and being unfair to workers, like with Red Dead 2. I mean, really, crunch culture is terrible, but even with the bad publicity, the game sold really well. And sometimes it doesn't work in the company's favor. Like when EA settled for over $15 million to developers who accused them of overworking them on The Sims 2. I'd bet just paying some overtime or hiring some people would have been cheaper than a $15 million settlement, but that's just me. Speaking of EA, the loot box fairy himself, CEO Andrew Wilson, says that maybe he's found the solution to not having to pay as many workers anymore. And that solution is by deeply embracing AI, maybe even having it impact 60% or more of game development.
What the hell is this?
He said this a week after laying off just shy of 700 people, by the way. Boy, if you think quest and art design is generic already in your favorite looter shooter, just wait till AI's making it. Fabulous news, gentlemen. Our groundbreaking AI can create 5,000 different fetch quests at ease. Quantity over quality, am I right, fellas? Oh. Horace, would you be a doll and bring out some fresh caviar? But it goes beyond just AI work is inferior, which right now it is. It also brings up several legal and ethical questions. The ethical debates around AI will be a discussion for another day, but bottom line, AI is like reaction streamers on steroids, sidestepping as much effort or creativity as possible to put out as much product as possible. Objection! Wait. This video is about business not making sense. If AI can cut costs and raise profits, wouldn't Norman Osborn like generative AI?
Costs are down, revenues are up.
Well, no. At least not yet. Here's why. After companies invest so much in AI without really knowing what the results will be just yet, we will see delayed projects due to unforeseen issues. We will see even more wasted company dollars on fixing messes created by their AI, and we will see them hiring people who specialize in AI but may not actually know or care about making good video games. You thought Battlefield 2042 at launch looked like it was made by AI? Brother, wait till EA cranks that AI up to ludicrous speed. And guess what will happen after these companies lose buckets of money on these initial AI projects? The same thing that happens any other time they waste money during a game's development.
We gotta drop the load!
They start cutting things, but not the price. Take digital-only games for example. No ownership of the game you bought, no tangible product to keep at your place, no promises they won't just take it out of your game library a year from now, but by God, they're still raising that price to $70. Check out my video on the dark side of digital media if you want to hear more about that. You know, if you want to.
He's actually trying, what a nerd.
Digital only means no more cheapskates selling each other used games to try to save some money. You'll want to buy a $10 copy of Black Ops 2 from your local used game store? Well, I hope you did it before it closed down. The digital version of that game from over a decade ago is still a whopping $50. Unless that store was GameStop, then screw them. Sounds harsh, I know, but that's what they get for offering me 10 cents for my Xbox 360 console back in 2013.
And there's plenty more where that came from.
True story. But cutting physical copies and laying off workers is not enough for these companies. Oh, no. The next thing they like to cut from their games is the games. I have tons of videos on this concept, so I won't spend a ton of time on it here, but every one of us that's seen a high-profile game launch in a piss-poor state or with half the features it should knows exactly what I'm talking about. What, our PvP game only has 4 modes in a series that's historically had dozens of them? Ship it! We'll get money from the cosmetics anyway. Our single-player game doesn't even function to the point where it'll lead to a recall, class action lawsuits, and investigations by consumer protection agencies? Ship it! Our fans are loyal, they'll wait for us to fix it. How about something more difficult now? It's easy to crap on things we all hate, but what about unnecessary investments that I bet some of you watching this actually really like? What do Among Us, Stardew Valley, Minecraft, and Fortnite all have in common? Despite being in different genres, they're all hit games, and not one of them has lifelike movie-quality visuals. You know, the type of graphical fidelity that when your grandma walks in the room, she's like, "Oh, this is a video game? I couldn't tell." Now, of course, I'm not suggesting that every game needs to look like Superman 64, but folks, it's not 2006 anymore. The arms race for the best graphics is over. I think most people would agree that if graphics just sort of stopped progressing where they are right now, or in Battlefield 3's case, stopped progressing past what they did back in 2011, I think we'd be alright with that. Nintendo, Fortnite, so many indie games without realistic visuals have already proven that, get this, if a game is fun, people will buy it.
It's not true. That's impossible.
We're at the point in graphical fidelity that even remasters are becoming difficult to spot from their originals in some cases. Tanking massive amounts of money into the most graphically impressive, borderline uncanny valley visuals just isn't necessary to make a successful video game anymore. And if anything, it can just tie up resources that could have gone into adding more content or more features to make the game better. I'm sure plenty of people will disagree with me on that, but I'd bet a lot of you kings watching right now would rather have a good game with mediocre graphics than a mediocre game with good graphics. And if I'm wrong, then by God, let's just let every game be the next Hellblade or the Order 1886, I guess. Better yet, maybe that Matrix Awakens demo where you literally just walk around on a street so it can show off Unreal Engine 5. Yeah, that can be the new bedrock of gaming. Visuals and gameplay absolutely can go great together. I'm just making the point that when a company insists on pushing the boundaries of graphics and visuals, it gets expensive, and unnecessarily so. And if game development is just getting too expensive to give us complete games or treat workers fairly, then consider this some free advice on the very first thing you could scale back on to save money. You have my permission to not worry about pores and peach fuzz on character models. Just make a good game.
Costs are down.
But throwing away money isn't all they do. They straight up gamble it. If every penny counts when running a game company, why do execs keep insisting on putting out high-risk live service games with low barriers of entry, like free-to-play or games that rely on microtransactions to survive? Now, don't get me wrong, as a lifelong cheapskate and proud bearer of the name Mr. Krabs by my friends, I love the idea of getting to boot up a new game for free. But the history of games didn't start with Fortnite. Free-to-play games are a tremendous risk for a company. Not only is a live service game gonna need around-the-clock care, maintenance, and new additions to keep a player count, but it's also extremely easy for a person to just try it and uninstall, or worse, play it for months and spend nothing, earning the studio behind it not even 1 penny. It's debatable if free-to-play games are actually as player-friendly as they seem. I might do a video on that sometime in the future, but for now, let's put ourselves in the shoes of the execs. Your live service game that requires long-term development and maintenance is not free to develop nor maintain. Depending on the game, this can range from thousands a month to millions of dollars a month. A one-time purchase by the player is off the table, so no waves of $60 or $70 when you sell it. You have to keep persuading players to rack up more playtime with events, new content, and incentives to bring people back. No development breaks. High risk, high reward. A bunch of game devs were surveyed at DevCom 2024, and nearly 90% of them said that premium games don't need microtransactions to be successful. They said that financial success can just come from being buy to play. Granted, these are the devs, not the suits, but I guarantee you when it comes to how much effort it takes to make a video game, their opinions are gonna be more valuable. And specifically for games on services like Game Pass or PlayStation Plus that aren't technically free since we're paying a subscription. Sure, depending on the deal, the company that made the game might get an initial payout or maybe some residuals based on playtime, but now they're competing for player time with other games that player's subscription is also paying for. Is it not extremely risky to have to fight with these other games for a piece of every player's $10 or $15 a month? So the next time a company worth millions or billions tries to tell you that it has to lay off its workers, it has to rush out a broken game, it has to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on a single game's development, or it has to paywall more and more features until the base game is nothing but a charred husk, just remember, the company chooses where to invest their money and where to cut costs. It's the meme of the guy drowning because he refuses to stand up. Don't let them guilt trip us players into paying for their bad investments, or aspiring game devs into working for them for cheap because it's just more expensive to make a game now. Thank you, channel members, for voting on the topic of today's video. For more on the dark side of digital media, click this video here. As always, thanks for watching. Carry on, you kings.